welcome back, everyone. I know people are still trickling in, but people seem to take their seats if we stop the music and I start speaking. So I hope that people will kind of come in. Please do their seats up front and all along the sides as well. So I do hope everyone enjoyed our speakers and our networking opportunities today. Thank you to Regeneron for sponsoring our afternoon networking session. So hopefully all of our patients and patient advocates, when you came in, you were given a ticket to go and pick a prize, put your ticket in a prize from our gratitude wall. By now, those people who have names were picked would have been notified through your app, so please do check your app if you have not. I do want to announce who our grand prize winner is, and I don't know if she's checked her email yet, but congratulations, Stephanie Fisher. This week, Global Genes released a new report titled Next, Imagining the Future of Rare Disease. This report explores a wide array of technological advances that are changing the way that rare disease patients are diagnosed, how research is conducted, therapies are developed, and care is delivered. It was based on nearly 50 interviews with rare disease experts and leaders within industry, government, patient advocacy, science, and academia, as well as an extensive review of academic research and press reports. It explores many examples of how patients, researchers, clinicians, and drug developers are harnessing technologies to accelerate change for rare disease. We have copies of that report for everyone at the back of the room, and when you leave, you'll be able to pick that up. And now for our closing panel, we are joined by 4 experts to discuss some of these advances that will be key to transforming the rare disease landscape in the future. Please join me in welcoming our panelists, Lara Bloom, President and CEO of the Ehlers-Danlos Society and a Global Genes Ambassador, Harsha Rajasimha, co-founder of the Organization for Rare Diseases India in USA, Dr. Razelle Kurzrock, the Division Chief of Hematology and Oncology at the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine, and Dr. Stephen Kingsmore, President and CEO, Rady Children's Institute for Genomic Medicine.
Thank you, Meredith. Well, I'm absolutely honored to be up on stage with some fantastic leaders in the rare disease world. And we're really looking forward to talk to you all about how we can all start to imagine the future of rare diseases. I have to say that after watching the disabled dudes moderating yesterday, I started sinking into my chair a little, panicking about how I would moderate today's session, worrying if I was funny enough. Can I mock where my fellow panelists live? Don't worry, I'm not going to do that. But instead, I decided that I would test out my British humor on you all and tell a joke. So I've been practicing my British accent all day. So apologies in advance to those who heard this yesterday, but in an effort to lighten up an incredibly dull topic that is GDPR, I thought I'd share a knock-knock joke. So here we go. I need full crowd participation for this, okay? So knock-knock. Who's there? GDPR. GDPR who? I'm sorry, I can't tell you. I know, not quite the level of disabled dudes banter, but the British version at least. I actually tested this out on my wife earlier, who wasn't at yesterday's session, and I was telling her about how amazing the disabled dudes session was, and she was like, Lara, that is so inappropriate, you absolutely can't call them that. And I was like, no, you don't understand. It's fine. So anyway, back to business. A recurrent theme that has been discussed time and time again over the last 2 days is how technology, collaboration, and whole genome sequencing can and will change the landscape of rare diseases over the next few years. So, Stephen, can you discuss with us a little bit what your thoughts are on the diagnostic odyssey that so many of us face with that in mind?
Yeah, I'd love to. So many of you have suffered through interminable waits to go from a sick child or a loved one to a definitive answer. What is the trigger? What's the cause of my child's illness? And then is there an effective treatment for that? Well, I lead a team of 60 people here in San Diego, And we've decided that it's time to retire that concept. It's time to put it irreversibly into the history books, that never again should a parent or a loved one have to wait. Our vision is you go to see your doctor, and the following day he calls you with the answer. He decodes your genome, or she decodes your genome, and we investigate every rare genetic disease simultaneously, and we have an immediate answer. And this whole idea about waiting will be something that a future generation at this conference will say, "What? You had to wait? Why?" And we'll all have a great deal of difficulty explaining why, because it will be unheard of anymore. Now, I brought some guests with me. They're sitting in the audience, and you've had a chance to meet them in the past couple of days. So these are some of the pioneers. These are all babies who were born in San Diego County and who went through the End the Diagnostic Odyssey adventure, although they didn't realize it at the time. So all of them had children who were very ill, and they were in a real hurry to understand what was causing their child's illness and was there an effective treatment. So on my left, which I guess is your right, I'm a little bit disadvantaged that way, is Sebastiana. And Sebastiana's sitting back there. There she is. Woo! She's 2.5 years old, and Sebastiana used to have Odyssey syndrome. And I say used to have because she was born and she had seizure disorder. She was critically ill in our intensive care unit, and in a couple of days, we gave the doctors the answer. It's Odyssey syndrome. It comes with this specific therapy. And she hasn't had a seizure in 2.5 years. She doesn't take any medication. And she's past that point in her life when she ever really ought to have to take an anti-epileptic drug ever again. Isn't that amazing? So that's Sebastiana. Way to go, girl. Woo! You are so cute. And then in the middle, we have Maverick. And Maverick, I hear, got burned out yesterday, but his sister's here, and she's super cute as well. And she's here with her mum. Would you stand up and just wave to everybody? So Maverick also had seizures. They started a little bit later. Sebastiana's seizures started the day she was born, and Maverick's seizures started about day of life 5 or 6. He was also incredibly ill. Both of these parents were told that probably their baby was going to die, and to start to think about that. Also with Maverick, we made a diagnosis within a couple of days, and Maverick's seizure disorder, of which he was dying, is treated by taking vitamin B6. He's been on vitamin B6 ever since, and now he looks like a little tiny superhero. He is a strong little boy, and he's his mom's pride and joy. Sorry he couldn't be here, but his sister's here, and she's very cute. And third, thank you. And third, we got Riley, and Riley's sitting back there as well with her proud mum and dad. There she is. And Riley was almost 11 months old whenever she first came to us. She was an outpatient. She was seen for the very first time at our hospital by a neurologist, Jenny Friedman, who said, "I think Riley needs a genome sequence." And within a week, we had the answer for Riley. And she had, and all of these children had, they kind of technically still do have, but they're liberated from their illness. So she had infant onset Parkinson's disease. She couldn't move. She was literally frozen like this. She couldn't even smile. The only thing she could move was her eyeballs. And now she is a little bundle of energy. And I'm sure it's going to be difficult to keep her in her seat for the rest of the time. And so she just has to take that pill a day, and she is going to have a healthy, prosperous life. So that's what we want to deliver for every family, for every disease, for all of you throughout the United States. It's a big proposition. Already we do it in 23 children's hospitals, from Miami to Boston to Honolulu, including the West Coast and the Midwest. And we're signing up more hospitals and more pediatricians basically every week or every month. So that's what we're doing about the Diagnostic Odyssey.
Amazing. And you're obviously doing pioneering work here. How far off do you think it could be that the world could see this?
We have a bill in Congress. So Representative Peters and Representative Shimkus have a bill in Congress right now that would provide rapid genome testing to every Medicaid baby in the US for a period of 2 years to allow us all to experience it. Most pediatricians have never had a success story like the 3 I've shared with you. So we've got lots of barriers to overcome, including to getting it paid for. And so that's our vision, is that this will happen very, very quickly, provided we have your support and that you are working on our behalf to get the message out, and in particular to support that bill.
Incredible. Thank you so much to everything you're doing to lead the way in this. Thank you. Okay, so Razelle, can you talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on the future of personalized medicine?
I think that was an incredible presentation. And I work at UCSD and founded and direct a rare tumor clinic and a Center for Personalized Cancer Therapy. And so rare tumors are individually rare, but when you put them all together, they're actually a huge part of the cancer burden. They're about 25% of the cancer burden. And like the prior presentation, what we do in our clinic is we sequence every patient. And some of the patients have ultra-rare cancers. They may be even tumors that we've never heard of. But in essence, the name of the tumor doesn't really tell you how to treat it. But sequencing the patient actually does tell you how to treat it. And at least in the cancer space, what we're finding is that about 90% of patients have what we call actionable gene alterations. Actionable means that we actually have a drug or a combination of drugs that we can give those patients. So this is a huge unmet need among cancer patients. These patients often don't have FDA-approved therapies. They're not eligible for clinical trials. And like the prior presentation, they can come into our clinics and we can do a genome sequence and have therapies that work for these patients, or at least potentially work for these patients. I don't want to claim that we're making 90% of patients better. I don't think cancer is complicated, and I don't think we know exactly how to do these combinations correctly. But for many of these patients, the responses are dramatic. And what we're doing is, I think, rational and scientific. From my viewpoint, this is the secret to treating all rare diseases. And it's not that surprising. It's doing a genomic sequence, and it may not just be genomics. It may be looking at RNA, protein, or a whole different pattern of different technologies. But those technologies all already exist. And then getting an answer quickly. The technology now can be done in a day or two, and treating according to the abnormalities. Now, one of the things that I think is really interesting is some rare diseases are actually driven by some of the same genomic alterations that we see in cancer. I'm not sure why the patients that get these rare diseases don't actually get cancer. But we always talk about repurposing drugs for cancer. In other words, using drugs that are used in non-cancerous situations for cancer patients. But I think there's a lot of potential, and there's already been a few instances where this has been done very successfully. If you have a rare disease and it's not a cancer, but it's driven by the same genomic alterations that we can target in cancer, we can repurpose those drugs and use them in patients that have those rare diseases. And a lot of these targeted agents are simple to take. They're not very toxic. So for me, I see the future as every patient that has a rare disease, actually every patient that has a disease, let's put it that way, but we can start with rare diseases, gets sequenced, and then the question is, do we already have a drug that works for those patients? Now, if I want to get a little visionary, the next step will be, can we create a drug that works for those patients in real time? And that sounds a little bit like science fiction, but I actually think we're going to be able to do that. We can already model what genomic alterations do. And I think probably it'll take another 10 or 20 years, but we'll be able to create drugs on demand for patients based on their genomic alterations.
Amazing. And what do you see as the barriers that would prevent this from being rolled out to rare diseases worldwide?
Well, I think that the barriers, the same barriers as we saw with rare cancers, and that we still see. I think you have to remember that genomic sequencing has advanced at a pace unparalleled in human history. The first human genome was sequenced in the early 2000s. It cost $3 billion. By 2007, it was down to 100 million. Now it's a couple of $1,000s to do a genomic sequence. But with that, there's a real learning curve for people to understand what those genomic sequences means, and also for physicians to become comfortable in that. And we've seen it in cancer, where genomic sequencing is really transforming the landscape, but still many patients don't get sequenced, and many doctors still don't believe in the sequencing. So I think the first thing that has to happen is we have to have an education program so people, and especially physicians and patients, both understand what these new technologies can yield. And this has to be an ongoing education program because the new technologies continue to advance extremely rapidly, and it's very hard for people to adapt to them and what their meaning is.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you so much for all the efforts you're putting in that area. Harsha, so I was delighted to meet you in person finally this week. We're both got the privilege to sit on the Argyll Council, the Rare Global Advocacy Leadership Council. And I've been hearing a lot about all your efforts that you've been doing regarding international collaboration in India. Could you share your experience with everyone?
Certainly. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I identify myself as an Indian American, immigrated as an international student to Virginia Tech about 19 years ago. And I'm trained as a genomics data scientist, so it's truly an honor to be here with Dr. Kingsmore and Dr. Kurzrock and Lara. So what I will share is my experience with international advocacy work, as well as a technology entrepreneur. And how my personal experience has led me on a journey to unleash some of the education that I got from Global Genes and being part of the rare disease community. Is there a remote? I can advance the slide.
Ah, so sorry. I didn't realize you had slides.
Thank you. That helps. I was going about my day-to-day life as a genomics data scientist at National Institutes of Health back in 2012, and I had a child born and that passed away at day 3 with a rare congenital disorder called trisomy 18 or Edwards syndrome. And I was told the baby should not have gone that far, and the neonatologist was very surprised, and this was here in Rockville, Maryland. That trisomy 18 babies are supposed to be detected even earlier during the pregnancy, and that they generally are not full term. but in our case, it was a full term. But that led me into reaching out to the Office of Rare Disease Research with Dr. Stephen Groft was there, and connecting with the Global Genes team and NORD, and started thinking about how I could apply my years of postdoctoral scientific training. But more than that, I educated myself about how important it is to put patients first, which was extremely well articulated in the 3 wonderful babies that we started the discussion with. From there, I decided that I should go in this direction and see, do what I can do in my capacity to advance clinical research to bring therapies faster. And then what I needed to understand quite a bit of, it's been 6 years now and I'm still learning. What did happen is I met with a number of wonderful people along the way who have children living with a rare disease, and that changed their life forever. So this is my perspective of the patient's journey, which is probably all too familiar with this to this community. But what I wanted to point out here is, a vast majority of the 300 or 350 million people that we hear globally remain undiagnosed. And so I think the first step is to get them to a faster diagnosis, without which the engine wouldn't start. And then on the other extreme, we have 1929 rare diseases that have already been in trial in some form or fashion. By trial, I mean clinical trial. And but we know that the approved therapies are around 650, 700, which cover about 400 or so rare diseases. And so there is 3 times more rare diseases that are still under research and trial than that are approved already. And so I think it's so important to see clinical trial as a care option, if that could be enabled in some way, not just in the United States, but globally. But there is a lot of good news and hope that as we see in the global initiatives to advance the diagnostic odyssey, bring down the average time from about 7 years to 1 year. And there is a concerted effort with various global initiatives, including the Undiagnosed Diseases Network International, or URDIRC, and the Global Commission to End Diagnostic Odyssey for Children with Rare Disease. So this is the map that I like to point out, which opened my eyes that 90% of the clinical trials are done on 10% of the population, predominantly in the United States, Europe, and a handful of countries. But of course, we need to engage the rest of the world, as it's a rare disease is a global community and it's a global issue. And so I founded an organization for rare diseases India, as there was much activity happening in the United States, to go back to where I grew up and met some wonderful parents that we co-founded this national organization for rare diseases in India. Being an Indian American here, I also think that there is much we can do in terms of building collaborative bridges between United States and India. And that's where my activities and focus have been. So in that sense, Global Genes has been a wonderful collaborator, and we had Global Genes come to New Delhi this year in April, along with ORDI, and we brought together about 35 patient advocacy group leaders from within India, all at a table, and we did an unmet need survey, and we understood what the needs are for the rare disease community in India. That has led to several working committees and so on. So thanks to the generous grant and travel support from Global Genes, really excited to have 13 patient advocates who have actually come here, right here. So it's all about educating our counterparts in the rest of the world as well. So one exciting area is the data and the need for having patients from all over the world in global registries and databases. As we know, over the last couple of decades, largely the genomic and the other data sets have been predominantly Caucasian in the databases. So we are looking at a vision that I have extremely small role to play, but I'm really excited to be having a small role in this project called RareX, which some of you may have heard of, which aims to bring in free whole genome sequencing data sets along with various other health data in the context of rare disease patient registries and have that as a global database so that we have the ability to find and identify similar patients who may be living anywhere outside of the United States as well. So here, we are looking at having a pilot study. This is a 24-month pilot projects that are being considered right now. And a lot of people are involved, and this is a work in progress. But we are looking at having an India pilot as part of the 24-month pilot. So really excited about seeing this truly becoming global now, expanding beyond. I'll skip through a couple slides. So one other technology venture or initiative that I have initiated is focused on overcoming the travel burden associated with participation in clinical trials. Like I said in my first slide, 3 times more rare diseases in trials than they have any approved therapies for. And so 24% of the patients who are eligible are unable to participate because of the travel burden associated, not just for patients, but also for caregivers. And so we have enough data to know that reducing the travel burden can significantly bring down the participation dropout rates in clinical research. So this is my last slide on the model that I have envisioned, and I'm seeking inputs, feedback, as well as potential proof of concept projects to see how we can start enabling travel-less follow-up visits for clinical trial participants on a smartphone technology with a centralized monitoring artificial intelligence backend engine. So happy to talk to some of you about if you are interested in any potential clinical cohort studies to be done this way.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. That's been really fascinating. And for me, definitely, it gives me hope for what the future of rare diseases could look like. I wanted to conclude by telling you all about our experience at the Ehlers-Danlos Society with Project ECHO, an incredible groundbreaking technology that is revolutionizing medicine. Since its launch in 2003, Project ECHO has conducted more than 100 disease-specific clinics involving de-identified case presentations and management for more than 1,400 patients. The concept is to move knowledge, not people. And Project ECHO is committed to addressing the needs of the most vulnerable populations by equipping communities with the right knowledge at the right place at the right time. It's an all-teach, all-learn concept. And I think that this is the most incredible platform for rare diseases. And we're really proud that EDS ECHO was the first ECHO for rare disease. And it's my hope that many of you will now follow in our footsteps. We've started with hubs in the UK and the USA, and we are planning to have hubs all over the world in the next few years. So I'm now going to play you a little video to give you a better idea of what ECHO looks like.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We are the first, we are the trailblazers, and I very much hope over the coming months and into the coming years that we'll have many, many more people connecting with us.
Agenda for EDS ECHO for this inaugural cohort is the following. There's there's a place for resources for this ECHO community as well. Are there questions for Dr. Chopra?
Yes, I have a question.
And I hope to see you back next week.
We'll be emailing you and asking you to put forward anything about any of the subjects that we've been discussing. I would encourage you to have a look at Fraser's paper on prolotherapy.
I've passed that information on to other patients and they're getting more benefit from it.
This has been a fantastic session. Thank you so much for joining us, Catherine. We've gone past the 90 minutes.
So ECHO was first launched for hepatitis C by Professor Aurora in New Mexico. And he was finding that patients were traveling from all over the country to try and see him, waiting really long time, years sometimes, to see him. There weren't specialists around the country to care for them. Sound familiar? I know it certainly did to us with EDS. And we thought this is the most perfect platform. And we couldn't believe it that there were not other rare diseases involved. So I really recommend that everyone looks into this. It's completely free. They're a non-profit. They have the most unbelievable set of resources, templates that you can use. And everyone that takes part in it, it's a little bit like a cult. Everyone that takes part in it has to do an immersion in the desert in New Mexico. And you go there and you come out and you're just like, echo, echo, echo. Because it's just mind-blowing. It really is absolutely incredible. And it's really changing the way medicine is thought about. It's tele-mentoring rather than telemedicine. But it's really changing the landscape for diseases. And I really hope it will start changing the landscape for rare diseases as well. A lesson that we learned through this process that perhaps others can learn from us as well is you can see we hope to have 1,000 new EDS and HSD experts globally by 2022. This is massively, massively needed, as I know it is with pretty much every disease that's in the room today. And for our first cohort that we launched in April, we had a fantastic group, but a lot of them were actually professional patient experts, which is wonderful. But the problem is you want the people taking part in the ECHO to be actively treating and managing patients, because that's the whole point. You need to get these patients diagnosed, managed, validated, and cared for. So we thought, what can we do about this? So we, again, trailblazing, leading the way with ECHO, used their platform to set up the first ever patient expert ECHO. And I think I'm personally, as a patient expert myself, I was so excited by this concept. And I was just, what did I need to know 10 years ago that I know now that can help build an army of people going out there so that when they say, can we present at our local hospital? Can we speak to our local PTs? Can we go and exhibit for you at a conference? We know that they're all using the same language, the same terminology, that we're training them in public speaking and advocacy, self-advocacy, fundraising, awareness, all these tools that you take for granted, but some people don't have access to how to learn these things. So again, we've launched this Patient Expert ECHO. The first one starts in October. Within 3 days of launching it, we had 450 people apply. I made the silly mistake of promising I would go through every application. That was fun. Well, it actually was, because seeing the energy and the enthusiasm from our patient community was really, really incredible. And so we're going to run 2 a year, the first one starting in October, and I really hope that this will help build an army. And I hope that you guys can take this message home and start to build your army as well with Patient ECHO. And if anyone has any questions about setting up their own ECHO, these are my contact details. Please reach out. You can type into Google Project ECHO and get their website up, and they have lots of information on there about how you can set up your own. Okay, so each of us have discussed how technology has the potential to shift the rare disease landscape over the next decade. But of course, there is no part of the rare disease landscape that can be isolated. So could each of you take a few minutes to discuss how some of these technology advances might relate to each other? For one, I could see that Echo could be the platform that could get out this information and help mentor others. Stephen, what do you see?
I think you touched upon a really difficult problem in rare disease, which is that a failure at any point in healthcare delivery results in a failure, whether that's not ascertaining a patient in time, or whether that's failure to get authorization of a test, or failure to make a diagnosis, or failure to get timely treatment, or failure to have the knowledge base in terms of what's effective and what's not effective in a condition. And this is something that confronts all of us. We individually can solve pieces of a problem, but if we don't have an integrated healthcare delivery system, which is a learning healthcare system, then patients may not get the benefits that we think we've solved a problem for. They wind up being stuck at just a different bottleneck in the journey. This is something that we've been responding to. We're raising about $80 million currently, because in our field, we're dealing with hundreds of children's hospitals, and many of them have little resource to put these pieces together. And we're trying to think about, what does an integrated learning healthcare delivery system look like that has all of the pieces that allow us to go not just to end a diagnostic odyssey, but to result in an optimal outcome for a patient and a family. And that is proving to be quite an elusive and difficult thing. And I think I'm excited to be here today, because I can't see how we can do it without patient advocacy groups helping us. We're trying to create a solution essentially for you. We're focused on a very specific point in time, which is the worst day in your life, when you've had a newborn baby and the baby was taken away from you at birth, and doctors can't explain why. So it's a specialist situation, but we realize that we need a lifetime solution for families, not just in those initial days of crisis.
Absolutely. So often we focus on the diagnosis, but then people are often sent back to where they live, and they're just left in the wilderness with no one to manage or care for their symptoms. They're often given very limited courses for treatment, if any. So I absolutely agree that it has to be the full picture that we focus on. Thank you. That was really helpful. Razelle.
So I think there's a lot of new ways of doing things that are potentially very important. And again, coming from the cancer space, what we're beginning to see is acceptance of real-world data. And so we used to call that retrospective data, where you looked back and people didn't think it was very meaningful, but we gave it a new name, which is real-world data, and now everybody's really excited about it. But I think this is a really good thing, because as everybody knows, doing a clinical trial takes years. And sometimes, especially in the cancer field, but I'm sure in every field of medicine, there's already data out there. So what is real-world data? Where have we gone in cancer? Well, there's already 2 drugs, I think most people don't realize this, that are approved by the FDA, either partly on real-world data, or recently there was a drug approved completely on real-world data with no clinical trials. So one of those drugs is Keytruda, or pembrolizumab, which is an immunotherapy that has gotten a lot of attention because of the profound responses. And the approval for patients with microsatellite instability was in part on real-world data. And this is because there's now large collections of data from the electronic medical records. So the FDA didn't ask the company to go back and do another clinical trial. They accepted the mining of the real-world data. And then there's a second drug that is a drug for breast cancer, for female breast cancer. And very recently, it was approved for men with breast cancer, but there was no clinical trial. The FDA allowed the company to go back and collect data where physicians had just given the drug. And they gave the approval on that. Now, when you think about that, how fast that can be compared to having to do a trial that might take years and the money that that would cost, to me, I think that this is a potential revolution. I also think the FDA is extremely open to this, and I always think you can tell how a committee is going to vote by the people you put on it. So the recent deputy FDA commissioner is Amy Abernathy, and she actually used to be the vice president for Flatiron, which is the source for real-world data. So to me, there couldn't be a better signal from the FDA that they're interested in real-world data than appointing a deputy commissioner that came from the world of real-world data. So I think that opens up for all rare diseases the potential, now that we have so much computerized data, to actually figure out, at least for some patients, solutions and even get them through approval without doing clinical trials that might take years. And that, to me, is completely transformative.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Harsha.
Yeah, I would say I think the technology pieces, they all exist, but they are in silos. And there is digital patient community there. There is whole genome sequencing in the neonatal settings. And then there is patient registries. It's all the data silo problem. So I think where they all need to come together is having that continuum going from end to end, where that's seamless and speed is of the essence. And we have here Dr. Kingsmore, who was responsible for getting the whole genome sequencing pipeline done in 19.5 hours, right? So he holds the Guinness record for doing that. And so speed is of the essence, whether it is for one step in the process of diagnosing or getting the therapies. The clinical trials do take several years, but they don't need to take as many years if we can have the process of finding and recruiting patient participants in a trial streamlined. And that's where I see that and as well as the international perspective of making sure this can be done at scale globally. As we know, rare disease trials can be small populations, even single-digit numbers sometimes. And FDA has enabled such innovative trial processes to enable even small studies without having to be double-blind and what have you. So I think there is a lot of hope, but for speed to be achieved in this process, where the patient groups are solely focused on care about having a therapy for their child, and as quickly as possible because the time is running out. And to achieve that speed, all these pieces have to come together.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists here today. And thank you to you all. And thank you so much to Meredith, all the team at Global Genes. I think you'll all agree that this has been an absolutely exhausting 2 days, but absolutely incredible. And I know personally I've networked with so many inspirational people that you just wouldn't get the opportunity to all be in one place together. And it's an utter privilege to work with Global Genes. So thank you to Global Genes. Should we exit the building? Okay.
Thank you to our panelists, and Lara, I should just have you do the final, my final remarks for the evening or for this afternoon. But thank you all so much to both our panelists this afternoon and to all of our speakers that have presented over the course of 2 days. We so appreciate their time and expertise and sharing that with all of us. We all feel a sense of urgency, but as so many of our speakers have reminded us this summit, remember to take the time to make connection and find humor and happiness alongside the challenges as we work to achieve things that even a few years ago we didn't know were possible. And so now just a little bit of housekeeping, official housekeeping business. As always, please do fill out your mobile app and survey so that we can help tailor an even better summit next year. We want to thank our amazing exhibitors and sponsors and partners without which, that's correct. It's the end of, I can't even speak quite well anymore, but we really couldn't have this conference and do all that we do without their support. So we're greatly appreciative. As we said at the beginning, and you all have noticed, we were in a new setting this year here at the Sheraton. We really do want to thank them for working with us and making this such a wonderful event. Thank you to Maureen Stubbs and the entire team at the Sheraton San Diego. Thank you to Scott Hines, Brett Antel, Chad Fry, and the entire PSAV team for supporting our presentations in AV needs, which is amazing. Do want to acknowledge our staff that's in the room, particularly Danielle Thompson and Maureen MacArthur Hart, who were responsible, along with their planning committee, for the speakers and presentations, and they did a fantastic job. And most importantly, a special thank you to each and every one of you that are sitting here in this room, and those of you who are watching remotely via our live stream. We sincerely hope that you enjoyed your time at the summit. We're thrilled that we will be back here again for our 9th annual Patient Summit, September 21st through 23rd, 2020. So mark your calendar. Thank you. Thank you so much. But this year's not over yet. We're going to take a short break and then invite you to join us back at 6:30 on the Bayview lawn for the Rare Champion of Hope Celebration reception, followed by the Rare Champion of Hope celebration. The celebration reception will be outside, and then we'll be joining us in here for dinner, which will begin promptly at 7:30, right back here in this room. And with that, a huge thank you to all of you. What? Wait, hold on. Oh, thank you. And the next report, I mentioned earlier, it is outside as you go out those doors. Thank you so much.